tuned in to The Andrew Lawton Show.
I wanted to shift from one trampling of your rights to another here. We have on an ongoing basis here the federal government going after the rights of law-abiding gun owners in this country. We have a so-called buyback plan in which the government is going to buy things back that it never once owed in the first place. They're still trying to find a vendor to manage this buyback program. This was announced, just to put this into perspective here, just shy of 4 years ago. And still, there is no program in existence yet. And the fact that they haven't found a vendor yet, normally I would accuse governments of dragging their heels and slowing things down. In this case, I'm going to say go as slow as you want to, guys. I am in no rush to have my property confiscated. Rod Giltaca is the executive director of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. It's always good to talk to him, and he joins us now. Rod, welcome back, sir. Your video looks better than mine. You've got that good podcast set up there. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, Andrew.
So again, I mean, normally I never want government to be mired in bureaucracy. In this case, I'll kind of make an exception for it here. But legitimately, what is the holdup here? Because originally this was supposed to not just be in motion, but done by 2022. By May of 2022, there was supposed to be every one of these guns picked back up by the government. We're now 2 years beyond that, and not a single gun has been confiscated.
Well, the holdup is that the challenge to doing a national buyback in a country like Canada, unlike, let's say, New Zealand, Canada is 10 million square kilometers. So there's a lot of challenges there. The government has tried a lot of different things, ended up being headed off at the pass, a lot of dead ends, right? They wanted Canada Post to do it. Well, first they wanted the RCMP to do it, and they're like, no, thanks. We have to this other thing that we're doing called policing. Then they wanted Canada Post to do it, and they're like, you want people in Canada Post outlets to be sitting on hundreds of apparently assault style firearms, and our employees are the only thing between these firearms and the criminal element. And now they're asking gun stores to do it, which gets really, really tricky.
Yeah, and I mean, you obviously have, I mean, gun stores, as you and I have spoken about it, as I've spoken about on the show, have been among those most directly harmed by this, because they've been saddled with inventory that they've been able to do nothing with, very little communication from the government, very little confiscation, or consultation. There's a Freudian slip. But the one point that I would stress there is that they're also generally opposed to this. So they don't want to be agents of this confiscation regime.
Well, it puts them in a really, really terrible position if you think, they can't sell handguns anymore. Handguns and handgun ammunition was big business for a lot of gun stores. They can't sell a wide variety of semi-autos that they used to. So their inventory, their possible inventory, or the products that they can carry has been dramatically reduced. And then the government says, hey, here's a revenue stream for you in helping people comply with the law. So I think that on one hand, you have a lot of gun store owners going, I could really use the business. On the other hand, it's like, well, do I want to destroy my business by giving in and being an agent of confiscation on behalf of the Liberals against the people who I want to be my customers? I'm glad I'm not in that position, but I would not be surprised if the overwhelming majority of gun store owners decide they want nothing to do with this.
Yeah, and I think one thing that was really, really encouraging to see is Alberta and Saskatchewan take the stand they did and say, you know what, you may control the criminal law, but we control how police resources in our province are deployed, and we are not going to allow police to engage in this function. I was hoping, it would just magically cause this national ripple effect and every province was going to do it. That hasn't happened, though. So right now, if the Liberals had their way, we would still, in the majority of the country, see this brought to fruition whenever this program comes, with legal appeals notwithstanding.
Well, yeah. If the Liberals had their way, but I think they're handling it like they handle most things, right? They'll come out with a big press release, full court press. This is what we're doing, and this is exactly what we said we were going to do, and that's exactly what we're doing, and we're keeping Canadians safe and doing all this garbage that they've done for 8.5 years. And then when reality shows up, they completely fold like a cheap suit. Like that is exactly what the Liberals have done, I guess, other than pot. But if you think of it, only the Liberal government, the Liberal Party of Canada, can lose money selling weed. But it's all been about press releases and, I don't know, gaslighting, I guess you could say. But this time it's different, because this time the challenge is so great that it would take a highly competent group of people to make this happen. And lucky, I guess, for gun owners for now, that doesn't exist in the Liberal government. So I guess we're going to have to see where it goes from here.
I just wanted to get you to give an update, if you could, on where the legal side of this is, because I know there were a couple of challenges going on. I know you've had some unsuccessful rulings, but is there still a glimmer of hope on that path?
Well, we are appealing, and I can't claim to say I'm not envious of what happened yesterday. But I think if anything, what an interesting time in Canadian history to even just be monitoring the judiciary, right? On one hand, the government comes in because of an unrelated event, which was the impetus for the assault style weapons ban, which was Nova Scotia, where this perpetrator had smuggled all of his firearms that were used in those shootings from the United States illegally. And then Trudeau's like, we need to ban guns in Canada. And then you have a court saying, well, you have no property rights. You have no rights of self-defense. That's another charter question that we asked. And we had a question that was very clear, and we still believe we clearly should have won on that, which is the government, it was the OIC, the Order in Council, was ultra vires. It's very similar to the ruling that came out yesterday. The government didn't have that authority. So they slap us all down on all counts with a very scant decision. And then a month later, a federal court decides that it is unreasonable and unconstitutional for the government to ban plastic shopping bags and plastic straws. I mean, that was a line too far. And then we have this ruling, yesterday, right? So it's the judiciary is all over the place. The moral compass in this country in so many corners is spinning. Mm-hmm. Can't find, north anywhere, apparently. So I hope that we'll be successful on appeal, because, again, property rights, self-defense issues, and the role of government in our society, all at stake in that case.
Well, and the one point that I think has always remained important here is that a political solution is always available. It's always possible for the government to one day snap its fingers and say, we're no longer proceeding with this. Now, that's unlikely under this government, but if this process is delayed and delayed and delayed until past the next election, another government, I mean, let's be real, the Conservatives are the ones most likely at this point to form government, could still say this is not happening and put it dead in its tracks, could it not?
Well, it's going to take legislation on some. It's really complicated how the Liberals have done their OIC and Bill C-21 and C-71 before that. The Order in Council, that could be struck down, but it gets quite complicated. So it may require legislation, which will require a Conservative majority government. But yeah, in Canada, as I've said ad nauseum, in Canada, using the British parliamentary system, our government can do pretty much whatever it wants to anybody it wants. The courts are, I'm not going to say, powerless, but they have a lot less power than they have, say, in the United States. And then, of course, they're influenced. I think we can all agree on that at some level. But the whole system gets pretty complex. But what one government does, another government can undo, is really the rule of thumb in our system, even though those powers are pretty dramatic. But that's a political solution is the easiest path, I guess you could say, to Canadian gun owners just being left alone and getting their property back.
Rod Giltaca, head of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. Always a pleasure, sir. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.